Broncos, and they lose defensive end Gabe Wilkins. And there's a big question. I don't know if Reggie White's going to play any more football. That hasn't been decided yet. I don't think he's going to. So they need defensive end help, and that's where Holiday fits right in, because remember, this is a team that wants to get back to the Super Bowl, so they want to get a guy in that will start right now.
Well, there's always the possibility. You've got flexibility. I think you've got a little flexibility with Santana Dotson. He is such a great competitor and a terrific defensive lineman. In spots, the way Fritz Shurmur likes to move things around on defense, you could possibly move him outside. And don't forget, Fritz Shurmur is the master of massive types of defenses, from 5-2s to 2-5s to 3-4s. You could see a little bit more 3-4 out of the Green Bay Packers also, which would solve that problem.
Well, Joe and Chris, I thought, when you look at Vonnie Holiday, it wouldn't have shocked me back a month, 2 months ago if the St. Louis Rams took him at 6. I thought he was one of the top 10 players in this draft. I thought he was on a par with Wistrom. I think when you look at the Green Bay Packers, how he fits in, I think, he's a heck of a pick. Moving up, you're not going to get him if you remain where you are if you're the Green Bay Packers. You get that versatility. I think this is a choice that for John Dorsey and for Ron Wolf, they did a heck of a job. You'll wonder why teams are in Super Bowls, because they make good moves. And whether the right player slid or not, Vonnie Holiday was not going to be there late in the first round.
So they will have a holiday in Green Bay after this draft, right? Well, they're having a holiday in Oakland because, once again, a Heisman Trophy winner will wear the silver and black like Plunkett and Marcus and Bo and Timmy Brown and Desmond Howard. And now it's Charles Woodson. On his way to Oakland, he's with our Mike Tirico. Michael.
Yep, just like Desmond trades in the maize and blue for the silver and black, there were some media reports about attitude questions from teams with you because you left the combine a little bit early and some workouts a little bit early. Did you hear any of those questions from teams?
No, none of the teams brought any of that stuff up. I mean, it was just stuff that was brought up in the media. It was basically all of it was untrue. I mean, I'm not a bad person. I don't have a bad attitude. I just want to get in and play hard and play good football, and that's it.
You have a DB's attitude, which is aggressive, and the Raiders can use that. We're going to show everyone where the Raiders stacked up statistically on defense last year. It was 30th all the way across the board in the 3 positions you don't want: yards passing, yards receiving. You were out there and met with some of the defensive coaches. What were their impressions of how you could fit into their schemes?
Well, I think basically, they just want to get me in there and just teach me the system. They just got Willie Shaw out there. He's a good defensive coordinator out there. He does a lot of the things that we did at Michigan. So hopefully I get out there and just make an impact and hopefully get some early playing time.
Finally, the one thing we all did watching Michigan games, we wanted to see where you were going to go. Were you going to line up on offense? Will you line up on offense, and have you talked to the Raiders about that at all?
We talked about it briefly, but like I say, I just want to get the defense down, and hopefully if the offense stems for that, then I go over there on that side of the ball and get a couple of touches on the football.
Was Al Davis as cool as you thought he'd be?
Oh, he was too cool. He was too cool for me, man.
Congratulations, Charles.
Thanks a lot.
Charles Woodson from Michigan to the Raiders. We send it to our ESPN studios and Chris Fowler. Chris?
Well, Mike, thank you. I think Charles making a key point. None of the teams concerned about his attitude, which has been the report of, or the subject of media reports. Part of it got started at a Walter Camp Football Foundation dinner that I emceed. One of the former officers of that club kind of popped off to a small Connecticut newspaper about his displeasure with Woodson's attitude, and suddenly this became a monster national news story. I can tell you, know Charles pretty well. Most of that stuff is unfounded. I think an NFL team that gets him into camp will find a guy, as he said, that's just eager to play good football, is respectful, is a team guy. And I'll tell you what, the coaches that watched him at Michigan, the first day of practice, put him as a converted running back in high school to defensive back, and Vance Bedford, his position coach, remembers thinking at the time, this guy is a terrible corner. This guy will never make it as a defensive back. Here he is, Heisman Trophy winner, and now the number 4 pick overall. The Detroit Lions are on the clock in the first round as the NFL draft continues after this from New York, Connecticut, and all points.
We are back in New York. Detroit is on the clock, and I got to guess it's safety Sean Williams. I mean, we're going right down the Bill Walsh scripted plays that's happened today, and let's go up to Gene Washington and see how we do.
The Detroit Lions have selected defensive back from Tennessee, Terry Fair.
A little different. Now, they had such great success last year, drafting 1 and 2, and got 2 starting corners, of course. in Westbrook and Abrams.
Well, I'll tell you, you look at him, 5'9" and a quarter, Chris. That's the concern. But you see his ability to play the ball. Interception here, real good hands for the INT. And I think when you look here against Florida in some big games, he makes plays there against Jacquez Green. And I think when you look at Terry Fair, he was challenged on a regular basis in the NFC. For the most part, did a pretty good job. A lot of pass breakups in the SEC, interceptions. You know, I tell you, he breaks on the ball well. Yeah, 5'9" and a quarter is a concern. Remember, they had Kevin Abrams last year coming in as a second-round pick. He may end up being the nickel back. They had Bryant Westbrook. They hit the jackpot with him. He's a great starting cornerback. But, you know, Terry Fair is a gamble because, like I say, he's 5'9" and a quarter. And you look at some of those wideouts that you're matched up against in the NFC Central. You know, you look at this and you say, okay, if Abrams wasn't big enough, now you go to another 5'9" and a quarter corner. We'll see what happens.
Let's move back a little bit before we discuss Fair a little bit more. Let's stay in the division and go back to Green Bay, who moved up 10 spots and got Bonnie Holiday. Our Ron Wolf is with our Hank Goldberg. Hammer.
Okay, Boomer and Ron Wolf, General Manager, Executive Vice President of the Packers. I know when you traded up, you had your eye on somebody, and then somebody else became available. You want to tell us what happened?
Well, what happened was we knew that in order to get the players that we needed, we had to add something to our defensive unit. We knew sitting at, or I shouldn't say we knew, but we certainly felt at 29 that we wouldn't be able to do that. So we rehashed it over and over again about what would be the possibilities of moving up, where could we move. Jimmy Johnson's always very receptive, and fortunately we caught him at a good time because we had to add defense. We were looking at two players. I think you alluded to Sean Williams. Certainly UCLA was one, and we never expected, and everybody says this, that everybody drafts, so we never expected the guy we took to be there, but that's the honest-to-God truth. We're just delighted. It's certainly an area we need help. We feel Vonnie can play end or tackle. It'll be interesting to see where he fits, but he will fit with our present situation on the defensive line, no question.
All right, Ron, thanks very much. We go back to New York for another pick. Boomer?
All right, Hank and Ron Wolf, thank you very much. Very quickly, Minnesota is in as we have a run of the NFC Central Division teams. Here's Gene Washington.
The Minnesota Vikings have selected wide receiver from Marshall University, Randy Moss.
There you go. Carter, Jake Reed, Randy Moss, a healthy Brad Johnson, Robert Smith signed, McDaniel and Stussy signed up front.
His brother Eric Moss, in Minnesota. So I think you look at Randy, you see the size, physical ability, athletic ability is tremendous. You watch him here against Ole Miss, and this is the first play, offensive play for Marshall, touchdown. That's the capability he brings to the table. Tremendous speed. I tell you, he can just explode on deep routes. You watch him here. Look at the athleticism coming up here. I mean, you're talking about a guy, look at that. I mean, you don't see that in receivers that come into the NFL draft out of the college ranks every year. Now, granted, he dominated a lower level competition. You see him here, fade route. He's unstoppable in the Mid-American Conference in that particular area. You know, catching the ball right off the defender's helmet. You look at this, a man among boys at that level. The question with Randy is, against West Virginia, and of course in that Ole Miss game after he hit the home run early, struggled a little bit, getting off the line of scrimmage, route running just a little sloppy. He needs to fine-tune his game a little bit. Obviously, the off-the-field concerns are there. He has to put all that to rest, stay focused on football, work on his game at wide receiver. I spoke to Andre Wadsworth about him. Of course, they were together that 1 year, and he said one thing about Randy Moss that impressed Andre was he was in the weight room and he was working to develop his skills. That 1 year he was at Florida State as a redshirt. So if he stays focused, sky's the limit for a kid with his physical and athletic ability.
Hey, offensive weapons in Minnesota, Joe. We just mentioned them here. I mean, let's take a look.
If you see a big grin in Minnesota, it's Brian Billick's, the offensive coordinator. He's got to be grinning ear to ear. Andrew Glover at tight end, all these wide receivers. You look at the receptions. Chris Carter with 89, Jake Reed with 68, Chris Walsh with just 11, and Hatchett with just 3. But now you bring in a Randy Moss. You go 3 wide. You've got the 3 biggest receivers in a division where they like to throw the football anyway. I think the one thing that Randy Moss brings now to the Minnesota Vikings is he brings a real deep threat down the field. You look at Carter, you look at Reed, both of them big guys, both of them mid-range big receivers. Now you've got somebody who adds a stretch to the field. You start stretching the field out with him, you can do an awful lot with those big guys underneath. So And I also think, we talked about this if he'd gone to Dallas, very positive influences around him. We talked about a Michael Irvin, I believe can be a positive influence, and a Deion Sanders. Now you look at Reed and Carter and the guys that have been put together on that Minnesota Viking football team. You've got a very good, positive group for him to be around.
I go back to the Detroit Lions. Terry Fair, 5'9", has to match up against a Reed, a Carter, and now a Moss in a division where you had Abrams, another small corner.
Yeah, but I still think quickness can negate size. Like I said, you can't be perfect with the ball.